The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to everybody to today's webinar on setting up a successful mediation scheme. This webinar is brought to you by the TCM Group. My name is Thomas Quavey. I'm a Senior Resolution Consultant here at the TCM Group, so I'm responsible mainly for training and for delivering our mediation services to our clients. So that includes both two-party mediations and group facilitations, as well as delivering investigations. I'm joined today by my colleague, Megan Glass. She's the Mediation Schemes Consultant. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Thomas, and hello, everyone. As Thomas said, my name is Megan Glass, and I work with companies that have established integrated or internal mediation schemes.
Brilliant. So Megan and I today are going to be really talking you through the process of setting up a successful mediation scheme within your organisation. We're going to contextualise that with a bit of an understanding of conflict as well as the mediation process and what's potentially involved in setting up your scheme. Just start with a few formalities. Firstly, the webinar is going to last approximately 30 to 45 minutes. If you do have any questions, please type those into the space that's provided on your dashboard. And what we'll do at the end of this process is we will start to answer a few of the questions that come up. We're only on air for about an hour or so we'll try and pick up on some of the questions that come through. We'll also make contact. We'll also make contact with you after the webinar to seek your views and your feedback so that we can understand a little bit about how we can do these better and how we can maybe provide webinars that best suit your needs. And please let people know, if you do enjoy the webinar and if you do enjoy what you've heard today and you've got a good understanding of setting up a scheme and what mediation is about, then do tweet it, do let people know and share it via LinkedIn. So I'm just going to start with a quick introduction for those of you who don't know us here at the TCM Group. Essentially, we've been in business for the last 12 years. We were set up by our founder and chief executive here, David Little, 12 years ago. And in that time, we set up well in excess of 300 mediation schemes for organisations across the UK and more recently overseas. One of our greatest strengths, I feel, here at the TCM Group is we don't settle just in one sector. We don't look at conflict and mediate just in one sector, but we really do mediate across the board, which brings us a great understanding of conflict, its antecedents, how it works, how people react to conflict in a range of different environments, really. We employ a team of full-time mediators and trainers, my colleagues, the senior resolution consultants here, and we're supported by a team of world-leading mediation consultants who also assist in the delivery of the work that we do. All of our staff are all trained in the mediation process and understand the key principles as well. So one of the things that guarantees is that when you do pick up the phone and speak to us here at the TCM Group, you're guaranteed to be online with somebody who understands what your needs are and if not, will certainly be able to point you in the right direction. We're also the founder members of the Professional Mediators Association. So, that's our attempt to really regulate the mediation profession and try and bring in some standards across the board for mediators who are now popping up and down around the country. We also offer, an outstanding customer service, and I say outstanding customer service. We've been recently accredited with a Customer First accreditation. We're very proud of that. We took our time and we made sure that we really went through that process in a way that ensured that we were getting the best out of it, and of course our customers were getting the best out of it as well. Okay, so as I said, we're going to begin by firstly looking at conflict. And up on your screen at the moment, you'll see a number of words. Some of those words seem quite negative, and to be honest, you might feel a little bit depressed looking at the screen. But essentially, all of these words are words that have popped up, words that we hear that surround conflict. When people think of conflict, these are words that they associate: war, battle, struggle, harassment, disagreement, complaint, quarrel. And I think this affects the way in which we view conflict in general. Indeed, people tend to look at conflict as an inherently negative thing. Here at the TCM Group and within mediation, we don't see it the same way. For us, conflict is something that is neutral. What determines whether or not conflict will become a negative thing, or indeed if conflict can be used to more positive ends. Well, that all depends on how that conflict is managed. That depends on the perspective that's taken and how people deal with conflict as and when it does occur. I mean, we see conflict as an inevitable thing. You know, it certainly is a clash. It's a clash of different viewpoints, different understandings, and different perspectives on the world. So thinking about how conflict has traditionally been seen, and we'll be talking shortly about the different mechanisms and strategies that organisations have in place to deal with conflict. Just popped up this quote from the Right Honourable Vince Cable a few years ago. We now face a crisis that is the economic equivalent of war. This is not a time for business as usual. Now, of course, Vince Cable there was talking about the economic crisis and the austerity measures that were being put through at the time. But I think the quote really is quite compelling in a sense, particularly the last line, this is not a time for business as usual. In other words, what he was calling for was for organisations, for UK PLC, to start thinking about other ways of doing things, more effective ways of doing things, more sustainable ways of doing things that were less costly. And this is exactly what the mediation process, what informal resolution of disputes within workplaces really works towards promoting. And I just want to give a little example of what the spiral of conflict looks like, and how sometimes it you know, nothing can stop it, or it appears that nothing can stop it. If I just gave a scenario, for instance, so I'll use Megan, who's here with me. Imagine I was Megan's manager, and Megan worked in an office just outside of my office, so on a desk, and I came in one day all flustered and busy and just wanted to get into my office and start working on my emails, and I whizzed past Megan's desk and didn't say hello, didn't say good morning, straight into my office, straight behind my desk, and onto my emails, just, you know, making sure that I got that work done. Now, how Megan might feel about what happened there, she might be upset. You know, she might be upset that I haven't come in and I haven't said hello to her. Indeed, that might be a scenario that you've perhaps seen yourselves or heard about. But what then happens at that time determines what happens with this potential conflict that we have here. I mean, Megan, you could respond in any number of ways at this time. How might you respond?
Well, there is a variety of ways, I suppose, I or anyone else might respond. My first thought might be, I might worry, what's wrong, what's up? I might just ignore what just happened and just continue on with my work. Or I might approach Thomas directly and ask him if everything's okay. But I also could maybe immediately be defensive or worry I've done something wrong and retreat into my shell. So there's a whole variety of responses that I could have.
Absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things we're going to go on to talk about there is about cultures of organisations as well, and trying to foster a culture in which people can feel more comfortable to share when they have concerns, when they have issues, when they feel that they're not getting something that they need. So if we turn back to our spiral of conflict that's up here on the slide, what you have is an initial unmet need that presents. So, for instance, in that scenario, Megan may well be very important for her that her manager says hello to her in the morning. That might actually be the pinnacle for her of professionalism, and for her manager to let her know that she's valued, that she's there to be recognised. To not get that would bring about a sense of loss. She now doesn't appear to be getting something which she believes she had, something that's important to her. Now, with that sense of loss is going to come a level of emotional or psychological response. So, you know, as Megan described, you know, she could feel upset, she could blame herself, she could retreat into her shell. But it's the actions, it's the interactions, and it's the reactions that take place after this emotional response that are really, really important. And going back to what I said just before this is why it's so important that organisations have functions, have strategies, have ways in which people can actually interact with each other in order to be able to share and communicate when these emotional and psychological responses are going on, when they're happening. So if, for instance, Megan could choose not to talk to me, for instance, when I came out of the office later on that afternoon. I've finished my emails, and maybe I say, good afternoon, Megan, and maybe she ignores me, maybe she blanks me, maybe she looks the other way. As far as I'm concerned as the manager, maybe I'm feeling, well, hold on a minute, why is Megan being so rude to me? And we see this all the time in mediations. Two parties believe the conflict starts at two different times. So my interaction now, my action, could be to ignore Megan, or maybe I take the rest of the staff out for lunch and maybe I forget about Megan. And these are the destructive behaviours. These are the behaviours that once they start, your spiral is complete, and then it becomes increasingly difficult to break up, because the destructive behaviours then feed into the unmet needs. Because then if I don't say hello to Megan the next day, she's still got that sense of loss. Those emotional and psychological responses are getting stronger. Her actions and her reactions to me are becoming all the more defensive. And that spiral goes round and round and round until at some point something happens which attracts the attention of HR or indeed anyone else within the organisation. Now, as I say, traditionally and typically organisations don't have enough mechanisms that can come in and break that cycle at a very early stage. The existing dispute resolution systems, well, they're reactive. They're inherently adversarial. They immediately pit parties against one another. They immediately ask parties not to talk to one another about the issues. They immediately ask parties to raise as much evidence as they possibly can to make their case, and they don't give parties the opportunity to step away from their position, to actually look at a different perspective. So they immediately polarize those parties. They rarely ever identify the root causes of the conflict itself. Indeed, what they work towards is to resolve whatever the issue is that's come up. So really, that's what could be at the end of an ongoing cycle between two people, and you're going to decide who's right or wrong based on the last event. All too often, individual and business needs are ignored whilst going through these processes. They can be extremely time-consuming. They impede creativity, and I feel they're divisive in nature as well. A lot of times I refer to it as the conveyor belt of the formal processes, because once you're on, it becomes increasingly difficult to get off. Indeed, the longer you're on it for, the harder it is to come off. And what they start to create is a grievance culture, an entitlement culture, a culture which is surrounded by litigation. And actually, the word resolution rarely comes into that. In fact, the language that you tend to see is much like what we've got up on the screen. I win, you lose. I'm right, you're wrong. It's your fault. I can't be bothered with this. These are typically the things that you will hear, and certainly those of you who've worked in the HR capacity and in the field will probably recognise some of these terms as being explicit language of parties who are going through the grievance process. I just want to pop up this quick quote from Carl Jung, actually. The most intense conflicts, if overcome, leave behind a sense of security and calm that is not easily disturbed. It is just these intense conflicts and their conflagration which are needed to produce valuable and lasting results. And I really love that quote, because it really does underpin a lot of the work that we're doing here. In essence, put simply, what we're saying is that if there's a conflict and actually you find a productive, effective way to securely find a resolution to that involves both of the people and helps them come to an understanding, actually those relationships, those agreements that come at the end of that process make those two people, make those teams far stronger than they were before. Because now there's a level of understanding. Now there's a level of awareness, acknowledgement of the other person's values, their belief systems, in essence, what makes them tick. And that's exactly what mediation tries to create. It tries to create a safe environment in which people can actually have these conversations and find ways forward which are based upon what it is they need, and trying to find a joint understanding of needs through empathy, through talking, through conversation. Couple of statistics here just to run through. I'll pick out a couple of key ones. You can see there 370 million working days lost each year due to conflict within the workplace. Which seems like an enormous figure, but again, as I see it, working as a mediator across all fields, across all sectors, we see this all the time. People are on sick. The stress that comes with conflict in the workplace is absolutely enormous. We spend a huge amount of our time in the workplace, so actually resolving conflict at work is probably one of the most important things that organisations can do. In recent research, 99% of SME owners agree that mediation would be a good tool for them for resolving workplace disputes. So that's small to medium enterprises. According to recent research, over a third of managers would rather parachute jump for the first time than to address a problem with their team at work. And I constantly pose the question when I'm delivering courses on mediation, why is that? Why is it that a third of managers would rather jump out of a plane at 10,000 feet than address a problem with their team at work? The answers that come back are usually quite similar, and it's about having time, it's about having the confidence, it's about having the competence to deal with these issues. A lot of managers who I speak to, and when we're doing developmental work around resolving conflict in the workplace, a lot of managers feel that they don't want to open up a potential Pandora's box of emotions, and that they wouldn't know what to do with, that they wouldn't necessarily feel they had the resources to do anything about. So all too often what happens is it escalates, until at some point HR are called in, and they obviously are very good at dealing with these things. The average annual cost to employers dealing with employment tribunal claims is in excess of £20,000, according to the Department for Business. Again, a number of people who I've spoken to who work with employment tribunals and work on these cases all the time say that even that is quite a conservative figure. And you can only imagine when you start to add in legal fees, any payouts at the end of the process, that figure is absolutely going to pale in comparison to the real amount at the end of the process. PMA research suggests that current grievance procedures achieve a positive resolution in less than 25% of cases. As I said at the beginning of this, I do investigations as well. This is something that, again, I see all the time, that these processes are divisive, and what you get at the end is definitely one person who still feels aggrieved, and a lot of the time, two people who still feel aggrieved by what's taken place in the process, or the way in which they feel the process has been handled. So we're talking about bringing cases to a real resolution, to a positive end. And TCM mediators achieve a positive outcome in 93% of cases. And by positive outcome, what we're talking about there is reaching a signed agreement between the two parties, a sustainable way forward that both the parties have agreed on that will work for the two of them. And it does seem like a high figure, 93%. But certainly for those of you who haven't been involved in the mediation process and seen what happens, what you quickly realise is that actually the primary goal of the mediation is to create an environment in which people can talk, in which people can communicate. Once you successfully do that and people are talking and are able to show appropriate levels of empathy towards each other, actually the solutions are not that difficult to come by. Actually the solutions are potentially the easy bit. They've gotten through the hard bit, which was actually being able to exchange a few words with one another. So just a quick definition of what mediation is. I think you can toy with this definition, but we certainly settled upon one that seems to tick all of the boxes. Mediation is a non-adversarial way of resolving difficult situations. It's used as an alternative to formal or legal processes. Mediation is not just a mindset, not just a framework, but also a set of skills. The mediator is a neutral person. They help the two or even more parties, as I mentioned, have an open and honest discussion to identify a mutually acceptable outcome. In other words, a win-win outcome. Mediation is about collaborating rather than blaming. Any agreement in mediation has to come directly from the parties themselves and not from the mediator. It's not for the mediator to make suggestions on what the agreement going forward should be. The mediator is not there to judge or to tell those involved in the mediation what they should or should not do. Mediation, and this is important, is both voluntary and confidential. These are some of the things that help engagement with the mediation process. People who attend mediation are there because they recognize it's something they need, and also it gives them a chance to express themselves in an environment where they don't feel that there'll necessarily be any repercussions. Some of the benefits of mediation that we can see here, I mean, quite clearly, the management and HR time spent looking into these processes, productivity, performance, time spent preparing, and all of these different things will have different costs depending on the size of the organization, the type of organization you are, the types of policies and procedures that you have in place. But nevertheless, all of these things cost, and those costs are all going to be relative to your bottom line. Managerial confidence, leadership, individual and team resilience, and, you know, giving an employees a voice, I think, you know, a meaningful voice as well, I think is really, really experienced. Not to mention the customer experience that comes on the end of having a workforce who feel fully motivated, who feel able to talk about any issues they have and aren't holding on to tension, who aren't holding on to stress. So now I think starting to move into thinking about setting up an internal or an integrated mediation scheme, some of the areas that we're going to cover in just a moment that are going to be important for setting up this process. TCM's conflict audit is a great starting place. It's where we start with organisations. There's also Apaxio, which Meg's going to talk us through, which is an online case management system. There's a training that goes with it as well. Awareness seminars, not to forget, for the rest of the organisation. You know, it's so important that the organisation are informed about what mediation is. Most specifically, your key stakeholders and those who will potentially be advising people on mediation. Make sure there's CBD and ongoing support and advice from TCM's mediation schemes. So just beginning with the conflict audit and looking at the impact, I'm just going to turn to Megan. Maybe you could just say a bit more about what's involved in that stage.
Sure. Thank you, Thomas. So the conflict audit is essentially the first step that we will undertake with companies who are establishing a new internal or integrated mediation scheme. Essentially, our conflict audit is it's a multifaceted approach to data collection that will, in the end, help TCM to develop for your organization a 3-year conflict management strategy report. So involved in that range of data collection is our cost of conflict calculator that will help you calculate the exact cost of various types of disputes. Something that was a dispute that was raised as a grievance, something that went all the way to an employment tribunal, an investigation, etc. It calculates for you all of the people's hours and time as well, so you get a finite number in the end. We also have an employee conflict survey to gather data around your employees' attitudes and perceptions of conflict within the organization. And then we also will run a mediation impact assessment and focus group for key stakeholders within the organization, in which we consult them on their perspective of conflict and also what they think the impact of introducing mediation might be. Together, all of that data is collected into that report that I mentioned. And this report will help inform both yourself and ourselves on the size, the scope, and the makeup of your mediation scheme, and also your mediation team, because we can also cover the recruitment of mediators as well, so who might be recruited. The next step would be our training, and Thomas can tell us a bit more on that.
Yeah, and I mean, just to say on the recruitment as well, there's nothing I love more than being involved in, you know, setting up a mediation scheme from the beginning. You know, to be involved and to sit in on the recruitment of mediators, and then see it through to the training as well, because it always creates a great environment in the training room when, you know, when the delegates are already comfortable and they know you as part of the setting up of the integrated mediation scheme. But the training, in essence, can be delivered in a number of different ways. I'll just quickly quickly talk you through a popular example of how the training can be delivered. The training is accredited by the OCN, the Open College Network, and it's a course that essentially is accredited on two main modules, a practical one and a written element as well. The first three days, so that typically would have 12 delegates on a 6-day course, with 3 days either side of a 10-day period. The first 3 days really look at the theory, the underpinning ideas of mediation, what it's about, what the key skills are, some of the psychological elements behind it, and an understanding of conflict as well. And really there's a practical element to that as well, but essentially what we're covering in those first 3 days are all the knowledge and skills that the delegates will need to partake in delivering mediations. The second set of 3 days is then fully practical. The delegates will get an opportunity to spend an entire day mediating. They'll also get an opportunity to play the part of parties, to understand from their perspective what's going on and what the mindset of a party is. So it's a very, very comprehensive training experience. It's certainly very experiential. You know, a lot of delegates are always worried about the role play at the beginning of the course, but it's amazing how many of those same people who are most worried about the role play at the end of the course turn around and say, you know, it was an extremely important part of the course. And indeed it really is. You know, it's for most people their first opportunity to sit through a whole day of being a mediator, and indeed for a lot of people it may be their only opportunity before they might be then being asked for the organisation to deliver mediation as well. But essentially the way it's that it's then accredited is you'll need to hand in a written element of works or activity sheets, a portfolio if you will, of work, which basically is a reflection on what you've done on the course and your understanding of mediation, the process, and then there's a practical assessment. So delegates are assessed over the course of that second set of 3 days on their mediation skills. They're also given an opportunity within the practical element of the course to write a reflective log as well about their learning, any areas of development, which again helps reinforce their understanding of the process, but most importantly their self-awareness, one of the key things to being a mediator. So that's the training. The next thing is that those mediators will then have to go back into the workplace and you know, deliver mediations and work in an environment where all too often mediation isn't known, it isn't understood, it's seen as a new thing. So what we have to ensure when setting up integrated mediation schemes is that the correct level of awareness is created. If I could turn back to yourself, Megan, for one moment, maybe you could say a bit more about awareness and how we do that within organisations.
Sure. So what I was speaking about earlier, the conflict audit, part of the on-site delivery is the mediation impact and focus group. And so in that we are engaging directly with the stakeholders. But as Thomas mentioned, it's just as important and perhaps even more to engage with employees, so those users of the service, as well as the managers who might be referring mediation. It's very important to raise awareness about mediation with them, so we can run an awareness seminar for you, and that's essentially an educational workshop where we will teach what mediation is and the benefits, and of course its limitations as well. So also included around the work that we would do with you in setting up a mediation scheme is setting up an account on Apaxio, and that's our own bespoke online case management system that has everything that you need to run a mediation scheme internally, and has all of the documents that you need for any stage, both to set up, run, and evaluate your mediation service. I also run regular quarterly coordinators workshops. Often it's the role of the coordinator is overlooked. It's very easy to focus on the training of the mediators, but it's so essential to have one person, or perhaps two even, to share the load, but a central focus for someone to have oversight on the mediation service to ensure that it's running correctly, that the mediators are receiving CPD, that it's being evaluated, because a lot of companies these days, they need to show their return on investment, and that would be a key role for that coordinator. So my workshops, we focus on different areas, and we brainstorm certain solutions to any problem that you can think of in relation to running a mediation scheme. And of course, I can advise on CPD for your mediators. And in my role as mediation schemes consultant, I am just always on hand to answer any questions that you might have around the running of your mediation service here. I can just be reached by email or by phone anytime.
Brilliant. I wonder if maybe we could just have a look at what we've discussed there, but with a real-time example, perhaps. Here's an example of setting up an integrated mediation scheme with Northumbria Healthcare, an NHS trust. Megan, if you wouldn't mind, would you just maybe talk the listeners through the different steps that Northumbria took when setting up their scheme?
Sure. So actually, it first started off, I believe, with Northumbria as just a simple mediation that they came to us to complete for them back in 2005. And then it started with, I think, individual people being trained in 2006. And then it was in 2008 that they trained a whole team of internal mediators. So in 2008, so five years ago now, we went through with them with these steps to build up their internal mediation service. That included the stakeholder engagement, so that's the Mediation Awareness Impact Assessment and Focus Group, which helps to inform the Dispute Resolution Strategy Report. And also to mention, at point 3 here, setting up a governance structure. Essentially, what we strongly advise for integrated mediation schemes is that there is some form of steering group for this mediation service that has high-level oversight of the service, to which perhaps the coordinator would report to. And we can, of course, help you with how that might be structured, probably meet on a biannual basis. And often this steering group or governance structure is staffed by people who attend the Mediation Impact Assessment and Focus Group, because those are the people who have clearly expressed an interest in mediation from the beginning. Of course, we set up Northumbria on Apaxio that was just developed in 2011, and we worked with them to incorporate mediation into their policies and procedures, something that Thomas will go into more detail shortly. And then, of course, they've completed our National Certificate in Workplace Mediation training, that 6-day training, in which the mediators receive accreditation, and they're ready to mediate complex disputes such as bullying and harassment or discrimination disputes. And finally, in just this year, the scheme, I think once an internal mediation scheme has had time to really settle and to grow into the business, it's a natural fit to start expanding those skills that the mediators have into other areas of the business.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the key messages, really, I think, that certainly myself and Megan are talking about here today in this webinar. It is this idea that mediation isn't just a flash in the pan, it isn't just a one-off, but actually if organizations are serious about using mediation, actually it does need to have an organizational perspective, because actually mediation can then become the center of your dispute resolution strategy. You know, and its use can spread, and with its usage, its benefits can spread also. You know, as Megan just mentioned there, we've seen Northumbria Healthcare extend the use of mediation into patient complaints. Consumer disputes, as that might be for other organizations, it ties in nicely with employee health and well-being. It can fit into your leadership strategies as well, thinking about the skills employed in mediation. Indeed, we develop a number of courses here at TCM which build on the fair mediation model, such as managing difficult conversations. We look at performance management. All of these things using mediation skills can actually make these processes far more effective, far more sustainable, and far more agreeable So it ties in again nicely with employee engagement. You know, it's all about ensuring that those who work for you understand the values of your organisation, understand the vision of your organisation, managing change as well, thinking about how you communicate change, how you allow your employees to have a voice. And of course, workplace and employment disputes is where it all begins, but at the centre of it all is mediation. Not just a process, and you know, as I said on that definition, it's not just a process. It's not just a set of skills. It's also a mindset as well, and that mindset can also start to become part of your other processes as well. You know, there's a great example here from Carol Russell, who's the head of ER at BT Retail, who's talking about how when they before they began offering mediation internally, one of the only choices for employees to go down was the formal route when things went wrong. And you know, as I talked about earlier, that can be an extremely divisive route. Putting an end to that was a real selling point for the business. But even more importantly, they were able to, you know, address issues very quickly before they started to become entrenched. And this is the key thing. You know, once people do get on that conveyor belt, as I described it, it can be very difficult to get them out because you're almost asking them to stay stuck in their position. Mediation has had a significant impact for BT Retail within the business. It's about everybody winning. With mediation, nobody loses. And it is. For me, it really is a cultural thing. And so one of the things that I'd ask you to take away from this webinar is to start thinking about what the culture of your organisation is and how mediation fits in with your organisation. One of the things you can do immediately, if you like, is you can take your policies and procedures, which deal with grievances and deal with disputes in the workplace. And what you can do is highlight, take a green and a red highlighter, and highlight all the areas of your policy which surround formal, adversarial, judgment, blame, punitive measures that are about defensive, combative, that are divisive, that are about winning and losing, that are about sanctions. And then with a green pen, take that and highlight all the areas of those policies which are about informal resolution, which are about safety, which are about talking, listening, increasing empathy, bringing about dialogue, non-adversarial mechanisms, collaborative, openness, values perhaps even, consensus, or even strive for win-wins. Now I would say, you know, I've probably been doing this for a while, but I would say, you know, you'd be hard pushed to have more green pen than red pen. And, you know, in all honesty, I think that's a shame. Because really that is the direction in which sustainable outcomes come from, those areas that are highlighted in green. I mean, think about doing a mini conflict audit, perhaps. You know, here are some questions that are typical questions that will take place in our very own impact assessment. Ask yourself some of these questions. Perhaps you get yourself and some key stakeholders together who are interested in mediation and start to maybe formulate answers to these questions. How many grievances or complaints did you receive last year? How many were resolved by informal resolution? Sorry. How many of those became formalised? How many grievances were actually upheld? How much time was spent handling those grievances? How much did they cost your business to actually deal with those grievances and bring them to the end? How much did they cost your business? What were the party satisfaction levels? You know, if you've got any form of evaluation to find out how people felt at the end of those processes. And to what extent did the grievances improve your employee engagement or add to the reputation of your brand? Again, potentially that's a question that might be more difficult to answer, but it's great to have a conversation around these things because that's exactly where the process of mediation begins. These are the type of conversations that you should be having within your organisation. And really to support what we've talked about here, the TCM Group has now developed a TCM resolution policy. And you know, this is a great document. I'm not going to say too much about it because actually you can contact us afterwards and get a copy of this document. But actually what's incorporated in this document is essentially 12 years of understanding and experience of managing conflict within the workplace. The resolution policy really we see it as a new approach to managing grievances and complaints. It's a new approach even in the name. It's a resolution policy. It's about resolution. We took that idea from the very fact that a grievance policy is about grief. Even in the name itself can stimulate certain thoughts and a belief system about the process which people are in. Within the document, which can be adapted to your own organisational policies and procedures, there's a link to values and vision in there. It allows you to have a better triage of cases that come through, so that you can decide and you can manage the cases that are and are not appropriate for mediation, and also that are and are not appropriate for formal action. There's clearly an emphasis in there on mediation and the early informal resolution of disputes. We talk in there as well about mediation information awareness sessions. I talked earlier about mediation being a voluntary process. That's absolutely no reason why an organisation can't create an expectation for people who potentially want to take a grievance out or who are having issues within the workplace to speak to a mediator or speak to someone who can offer an informed understanding of the process and what it's about. Mediation has to remain voluntary. It's one of the important elements of it. Fully compliant with the ACAS code. As I say, there's nowhere in the ACAS code that says you have to have a grievance policy so named. And it does offer the opportunity, as I've mentioned before, to escalate to an investigation. Mediation is not the panacea. It's not the answer to all of your organisational problems. It's an option. It's a very good option. And it's an option that I'm sure many of your employees could benefit from having available to them. And alongside that, there are many toolkits. As I say, to find out more, we're absolutely happy to send you a free copy of that. We're happy to meet with you to discuss your needs, and we can easily organise a non-obligation meeting to discuss the policy in relation to your own needs and in relation to your own organisational nuances. So in essence, the model itself draws on 5 core principles and really promotes these throughout. Fairness, mutual respect, empathy, dignity, and dialogue. So just as we move towards the close of this webinar, just want to quickly, because one of the questions that you might have at this moment is, but who mediates? Who should be our mediators? Well, in essence, mediation, as I mentioned on the slide where I put mediation right at the centre of your organisational strategies, well, mediation shouldn't just be a flash in the pan. Mediation is something that should run through your organisation. So your first mediators really can be your managers. I always say that managers are always, they're the ones who see the early grounds of some of these disputes that take place. Indeed, sometimes they may even be involved in them to a certain level. But essentially, to prevent the escalation of conflict up until that entrenched point where HR normally get it, really having managers trained and having an understanding of the process and having a confidence to be able to deal with conflict as and when they see it is one of the most vital tools you can have. That, your small end mediators, the managers, give you early resolution. They allow you to nip issues in the bud before they really become issues. Trained managers are effectively the best mediators an organisation can have. Then you've got your medium, if you like, M mediators, the internal mediators. These are the ones that will go through the training. They'll be accredited. They'll have continued professional development as well, and they'll start to become very experienced in resolving conflict, resolving disputes, which maybe could be quite escalated at that point. It may be on the verge of a grievance. A lot of people sometimes feel internal mediators, can they be impartial, etc. Well, of course they can. Internal mediators know how your business works. They understand your business, they understand the nuances, they understand the culture. Impartiality is definitely a skill, as we call it here within the TCM Group, and it's definitely something that can be worked on, but that's absolutely no reason why your own people cannot mediate within your own organisational circumstances. And then you've got your big M mediation, your external mediators. So keeping a link, essentially, you know, and I'd obviously recommend keeping a link with the organisation who did your training and who set up your scheme, because they obviously know your business and they have a greater understanding. But it's important to keep that link with those professional mediators to resolve complex disputes, team disputes, or even disputes that are of maybe a really high level, perhaps very, very senior disputes as well. You know, it's our day job. We understand your business. We've worked with you. We've got an ongoing relationship. Quality is assured. Maybe anything else that you would add to that, actually, Megan?
Yeah. So what we have been describing is again what we call an integrated or an internal mediation scheme. But there are other forms of mediation schemes out there. So one, using those quote big M external mediators, so for example TCM mediators, is what we might call an outsourced mediation scheme. So let's say if at this current point your organization wasn't quite ready to develop a team of internal mediators, we could still work with you to build a mediation scheme using TCM's mediators, but still applying those the conflict audit and the awareness sessions, all the wraparound support to embed mediation within the organization using external mediators. And then the third option is what we call a managed mediation scheme. And those are appropriate for organizations who might have a team of trained internal mediators, but who may not yet have the capacity for that role of the coordinator that I mentioned earlier, that is so critical to the success of an internal mediation service. So TCM can actually take on that role of coordinator for your organization. And again, still applying the wraparound support, such as the employee engagement and stakeholder engagement mentioned earlier.
Brilliant. Thank you, Megan. So, I mean, there really is a wide range of options, you know, open to you depending on the size and the type of organisation you are. As I say, speak to us. You know, we can certainly look at how we can apply our knowledge, our understanding, our experience to your organisational needs. Just to flip onto a slide here on the Marks and Spencer's experience. Philip Edwards, who's recently been in contact, actually, the employee relations manager at Marks and Spencer PLC, you know, recently let us know that actually the next step in their stage of their mediation scheme is to start issuing and exploring the use of mediation and its values globally now. So as I say, you know, once mediation is embedded and embedded properly, it can only grow. So next steps moving forward, call us. We've got a free phone number here in which, as I say, you can speak to any member of the team to talk about your needs. The telephone number is 0800 294 9787. Arrange a meeting with us. You know, if you need us to come on site or if you want to come and meet us here at our offices, you know, again, we can do the same. We can arrange a meeting. We can discuss your needs and talk through the dispute resolution policy. And bring us in so we can meet with you on your own ground. We can come to you, but essentially, you know, we can work with your needs, whatever they are.
And just to add in there that TCM could deliver a free mediation eye opener for you, and that would be really for any employees, anyone you'd like at your organization, in which we can answer questions around integrating mediation specifically at your organization.
Okay, so in conclusion, mediation is definitely the most effective form of dispute resolution available. There are definitely a wide range of mediation options available for your company, you know, depending on your size, depending on the type of organisation. But don't forget, you need to adopt a holistic and strategic approach to mediation. You know, it's important that actually it does form a part of your policies and procedures. If you're going to train internal mediators, they need to have a real framework to work around, an organisational framework to understand their role in that, and where their role begins and certainly where it ends. Involve all stakeholders. You know, I can't say strongly enough how important it is to get your unions, your occupational health, get everybody involved. it truly can be an inclusive process, and make it so from the beginning, and ensure you allocate the necessary resources. It's so important. It's not going to happen overnight. It will take a bit of time to begin with, but the important thing is that it will happen and it can be successful. Okay, so we're going to start moving over towards questions. So I'm just going to take a moment and turn over to Megan.
Okay, so actually I'm just seeing one question here from Katie, and you mentioned that this sounds very focused towards larger organizations, for example, having the coordinator and steering groups. But your question was, how might it work in a smaller organization where it's just one mediator, internal mediator, sufficient? Absolutely. I mean, what we're describing here is the sort of the end-all be-all of mediation schemes with everything that we can offer and provide to you. However, it absolutely is adaptable to different organizations, different sectors, and of course different sizes. So the number of mediators that you would have trained internally would certainly vary. For smaller organizations, let's say less than 100 employees, we don't have a formula that says X employees equals X number of mediators. It strongly depends on, let's say, your grievances and what proportion, how many grievances you might have per year, and what proportion might be appropriate to be referred to mediation. So taking that number, whatever it may be, and following a co-mediation model, it's common that you'll have smaller organizations with a team of, let's say, 4 or 6 mediators. Again, referring back to that co-mediation model, this is the model that we teach in our training, and it's one that we really recommend because it promotes learning, sharing of the experience, and there's that element of support. So certainly for newer mediation services, I think it's just a fantastic way to have sort of to build in confidence for your mediators, and also actually increases their chances to mediate. So I would say smaller organizations with a team of 4 to 6 mediators, you might not have a role dedicated solely to a coordinator, which is rare, even in large organizations. That's often a job, someone that does this in addition to their day job, but perhaps one of the mediators could be a team leader who might have the general oversight for the team. So there definitely there's no prescription of how it exactly has to work. It's absolutely adaptable, and we can work with you to see how it would work in your specific context. Do we have any other questions? Let's see.
I noticed there's one question about the slides and whether people can receive those slides. They will be available if you follow the link. I think we've got a YouTube link on our website. If you follow the link, those slides will be available on YouTube afterwards.
So the video. So we're actually recording this right now. So we will make this webinar, this recording right now available online. So anytime that you'd like to refer back to it, absolutely. Let's see, questions. You're welcome, Katie. And so perhaps we won't be sharing the slides themselves, but yes, absolutely, the webinar itself, so the recording. Do we have any other questions regarding internal mediation or mediation in general? Actually, while we wait for perhaps another question, just want to say that these regular coordinators workshops that I run, the topic varies, and a common topic is how to increase mediation referral rates. And so, because there's often a lot of focus on training up the mediators, but then it can be overlooked that there has to be a large push on internal communications about the new service. So a variety of ways of communicating. It can be internal, so your email signature, perhaps, mention that you're one of the mediators. On pay slips, that might be a bit outdated, but that's one option. Posters in the elevator, posters by the water cooler. So these workshops that everyone comes together and we share very creative ideas, and I create reports, write up reports based on these these tips and advice from not just from myself, but from coordinators of internal mediation schemes similar to that could exist in yours. So if you like, I can share those with you. And of course, if you work with us, you'd be more than welcome to join us. Those are free.
Okay, so we had a question from Barbara. What was the most difficult mediation situation you've dealt with? Really interesting question, just taking me back to a few examples actually. I think one of the trickiest ones that I dealt with was a situation where there certainly was the appearance that one of the parties had already got an idea as to what he wanted to do post-mediation. And when I say what he wanted to do post-mediation, I meant litigation-wise. So it seemed like the process was being used as a bit of a stepping stone. Indeed, the more positive and productive the mediation became, and the more agreement that was being reached as we moved through the process, the more resistant he became, all the way through to a point where we were almost at the end and we were almost kind of ready with a full agreement, and then there was a sticking point. There was an issue that the manager couldn't turn back on because it was an agreement that had been issued by HR, and it was about a file note that had to stay in place, and the person themselves